Every day for a week, a silent cowboy brought the broken widow bread and milk, leaving it on her porch without a word. But on the seventh day, his gift was something else entirely. "I brought my heart too," he said, "if you'll take it." This is the story of a love built on patience and the healing power of a simple loaf of bread. For Eleanor Vance, or Nora, as she once was called, the world had shrunk to the four crumbling walls of this abandoned line shack. 6 months ago, she had escaped a life that looked perfect on the outside but was a private hell within. Her late husband had been a man of charm and smiles in public, but a monster of quiet cruelty behind closed doors. His words had been a constant poison, chipping away at her self-worth until she felt like nothing more than a ghost in her own home. His death had been her liberation, but it had also left her utterly alone, an outcast with no family to turn to. She had fled to this forgotten corner of the territory, seeking not a new life, but an absence of one, a place so quiet she could finally stop listening for his footsteps. Her only companions were the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls and a hunger that was becoming a constant, gnawing ache. She had been surviving on scavenged roots and the last of her meager savings for weeks. Pride, the final, stubborn remnant of the woman she used to be, kept her from begging in the nearby town. She would rather starve in silence than endure the pitying or judgmental stares of strangers. On the first morning, it was the smell that woke her. A smell so warm, so comforting, so utterly out of place in her world of dust and despair that she thought she was dreaming. The smell of freshly baked bread. She rose from her simple cot, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Cautiously, she crept to the door, peering through a small crack in the wood. There, on her rickety porch step, sat a small, perfect loaf of bread, still warm to the touch, and beside it, a glass bottle filled to the brim with fresh, creamy milk. Her first instinct was terror. It was a trap, a trick. Kindness, in her experience, was always a prelude to cruelty. Her late husband had been an expert at such games, offering a gift with one hand while preparing a slap with the other. She scanned the vast, empty prairie, but there was no one. Just the endless grass swaying in the morning breeze. She retreated back inside, her mind racing. But the smell of the bread was a powerful torment, and the hunger in her belly was a raging beast. After an hour of agonizing indecision, her survival instinct won. She snatched the offerings from the porch, barricading the door behind her, and ate like a starving animal, tears of shame and a strange, unfamiliar gratitude streaming down her face. The second morning, she was awake before dawn, huddled by the window, watching, and she saw it again. A lone rider, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a cowboy hat, emerged from the morning mist. He dismounted at a respectful distance from her shack, placed the same offering of bread and milk on the porch, gave a brief, almost hesitant glance towards her dark window, and then rode away without a sound. He was gone before the sun had fully crested the horizon. On the third morning, she was ready. She watched him again, studying him. He was not a vagrant or a thug. He was a rancher, his movements steady and sure, his clothes clean and well-kept. He was her neighbor, the man from the Ryder Ranch that bordered this forgotten patch of land. She had seen him once in town, a quiet man who kept to himself. Why was he doing this? What did he want? The question plagued her, a puzzle her wounded mind couldn't solve. The gifts continued, a silent, daily ritual. Day 4, Day 5. The bread and milk were no longer a source of fear, but a lifeline. They were a constant, a promise kept in a world that had only ever offered her broken ones. Her body grew stronger, the gnawing hunger replaced by a returning warmth. And with that physical strength, a tiny, fragile seed of curiosity began to sprout in the barren soil of her heart. She started to see the man not as a threat, but as a mystery. A quiet, patient man who asked for nothing, who demanded nothing, who simply gave. And on the morning of the 6th day, for the first time in a very long time, Nora did something that wasn't about survival. It was an act of hope. Before dawn, she stepped outside and placed a single, perfect wildflower she had found by the creek on the empty milk bottle from the day before. It was a small, silent message. A thank you. A fragile bridge, built from a single petal, across the vast, lonely distance between them. The first gift had brought not comfort, but a night of restless anxiety. Nora had slept fitfully, the rifle beside her cot, her ears straining against the silence for any sound of a returning threat. She was certain the kindness was a ruse, a prelude to something terrible. But as dawn broke, another agonizing battle began, the one between her deep-seated fear and the relentless craving of her starving body. Day 2, she waited until the sun was high in the sky, convinced that no one would be lurking in the broad daylight. With her heart pounding, she slowly unbarred the door and peered out. And there it was again, a new loaf of bread, golden and perfect, and another bottle of fresh milk, beads of condensation glistening on the cool glass. Her mind screamed that it was a trap, but her body betrayed her. She snatched the offerings and retreated back into her fortress, her suspicion warring with a confusing, unwelcome flicker of gratitude. That afternoon, she did not rest. She sat by the grimy window, a blanket pulled up to her chin, and she watched. She would not be caught off guard again. Day 3, she was awake hours before dawn, a silent sentinel in the darkness. Just as the first pale light of morning began to silhouette the distant mountains, she saw him. A lone rider, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with a quiet purpose through the mist. It was her neighbor, Caleb Ryder. She watched as he dismounted at a respectful distance, walked to her porch, and gently placed the bread and milk on the top step. He paused for a single moment, his gaze lingering on her dark window, as if sensing her presence, before turning and riding away without a sound. He was not a monster. He was just a man. A quiet, perplexing man whose motives were a complete mystery. Day 4 and Day 5. A strange, new rhythm began to form in her lonely existence. She would wake, watch him make his silent delivery, wait for him to disappear over the ridge, and then retrieve the gifts. The ritual was unwavering, as predictable as the sunrise itself. The bread and milk were no longer just food that kept her alive. They were a symbol of a promise, quietly kept. The terror that had gripped her heart began to loosen its hold, replaced by a fragile, budding curiosity. Why? Why would a man do this? Day after day, asking for nothing in return, she started to clean the shack, not out of fear, but out of a returning sense of pride. She swept the floor, washed the window, trying to bring a little bit of order to her own chaotic world, mirroring the quiet order he brought to her every morning. Day 6. The change within her was subtle, but profound. That morning, as she waited for him, she felt not fear, but a nervous flutter of anticipation. She looked around her small, clean shack, and then at her own reflection in the now clear window pane. She saw not just a victim, but a survivor. And she knew she could no longer just take without giving something in return. It wasn't about repaying a debt. It was about acknowledging a connection. Before dawn, she ventured out, a small act of immense courage. She walked to the small creek nearby, its banks still dotted with the last of the season's wildflowers. She picked a single, delicate bluebell. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was beautiful. She returned to the cabin and gently placed the wildflower into the empty milk bottle from the day before, leaving it exactly where he would place the new one. It was a tiny, silent message across the lonely expanse. A thank you. A fragile bridge, built from a single petal. When Caleb arrived that morning, he saw the flower immediately. He stopped, his routine broken. He gently picked up the bottle, looking at the small bluebell resting inside. A slow, genuine smile, the first Nora had ever seen on his face, spread across his lips. He looked towards her window, and this time, he knew she was watching. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, placed the new bread and milk beside the flower, and then rode away. Nora watched him go, her hand pressed against her chest, her heart beating with an emotion she couldn't name. The fear was gone. The suspicion was gone. In its place was a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning Sunday. The daily ritual was no longer about a secret benefactor and a grateful recipient. It had become a conversation, and she found herself desperately wanting to know what would happen on Day 7. On the morning of the 7th day, the air felt different. Nora woke with a nervous anticipation that was both thrilling and terrifying. She had left another wildflower on the empty bottle, a silent continuation of their strange, fragile conversation. She watched from the window as Caleb Ryder rode up through the dawn mist, just as he had every day before. He dismounted and placed the familiar offering of fresh bread and milk on her porch step. But this time, something changed. He saw the new flower she had left. He picked it up, his large, callous fingers surprisingly gentle as he traced its delicate petals. A slow, quiet smile touched his lips. And then, instead of turning to leave, he took a deep breath, removed his hat, and waited. He stood by the porch, his head bowed slightly, his hat held in both hands, a man waiting patiently for a verdict. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. The ritual was broken. He was waiting for her. The safety of their anonymity was gone. For a long moment, she was paralyzed by the old fear, the instinct to hide, to barricade the door and pretend she wasn't there. She thought of her late husband, of how every kind gesture was a prelude to a demand. But then she thought of the past 6 days, of the unwavering consistency, the quiet respect, the simple, life-giving nourishment he had offered without asking for a single thing in return. This felt different. This man felt different. With trembling hands, she unbolted the door and stepped out onto the porch, pulling her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. She stood before him, the morning sun casting a warm glow around them. They looked at each other, truly looked at each other. For the first time, she saw in his eyes not greed or manipulation, but a deep, gentle kindness and a nervousness that mirrored her own. He spoke, his voice as quiet and steady as the sunrise. He told her he had seen the light in her cabin for weeks, had heard from the store owner in town that the sheriff's old line shack was occupied again. He said he knew what it was to be alone and that no one, no matter how strong, should have to face the world on an empty stomach. His words were simple, direct, and utterly sincere. Then he gestured to the bread and milk, and then looked directly into her eyes, his own filled with a vulnerable, heartfelt plea that shattered all her defenses. For 6 days, I've brought you what I thought you needed to survive. Bread and milk. But today, I brought my heart too, if you'll take it. The confession, so simple, so pure, was more terrifying to Nora than any threat. Kindness she could not understand was a language she had been taught to fear. Her immediate instinct was to retreat, to push him away. She took a step back, shaking her head, stammering that he didn't know her, that she was broken, that she had nothing to offer anyone. The ghost of her past marriage rose up, whispering that this was a trick, that his gentleness was a mask that would soon fall away. Caleb saw the panic in her eyes. He did not press her. He did not step closer. Instead, he simply nodded, his expression filled with a sad, profound understanding. And then he gave her the one thing that could possibly break through her fear: the truth. This was the plot twist she never saw coming. His kindness was not random. It was a lesson learned through his own heartbreak. He told her about his own late wife, Sarah. He explained that she too had come from a difficult place, a home filled with harsh words and a domineering father. When they first married, she was much like Nora, jumpy, suspicious, and unable to accept a simple compliment or a helping hand without searching for the hidden cost. He admitted that in his youth, he had been impatient. He had tried to fix her sorrow with grand gestures and loud declarations, but his efforts had only pushed her further away, making her feel pressured and misunderstood. He learned, he said, his voice thick with the memory, the hardest lesson of his life. You cannot force a wounded soul to heal. You cannot command trust. You can only earn it, slowly, quietly, day by day. He learned that the most powerful language in the world was not words, but unwavering consistency. A promise, quietly kept. After his wife had passed, he had sworn that if he ever found another soul as wounded as hers, he would do it right. He would offer not pressure, but patience. He would offer not demands, but simple, reliable nourishment for the body, until the soul felt safe enough to eat on its own. I am not asking for an answer today, Nora. I am not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that the heart I'm offering, It understands the fear in yours. It will be patient. I will be here every morning with bread and milk until the day you either tell me to leave for good or you decide to share a cup of coffee with me on this porch. The choice is entirely yours." He placed his hat back on his head, gave her a small, sad but hopeful smile, and walked back to his horse. As he rode away, Nora stood on her porch, the rising sun warming her face. His confession had not been an attack, but an invitation. His past was not a secret, but a key. He hadn't just offered her his heart. He had offered her something far more precious, something she had thought she would never have again. Time. Time to heal, and the freedom to choose. Caleb kept his promise. Every morning, without fail, the bread and milk appeared. But now, Nora no longer hid. She would be waiting on the porch, and they would exchange a quiet good morning. Sometimes, they would talk for a few minutes about the weather, about the hawk that circled the valley. They were small, tentative steps, but for Nora, they were monumental. The fear that had been her constant companion for years was slowly being replaced by a fragile, budding trust. She was beginning to believe that his kindness was real. She had not yet invited him for coffee, but she had started to leave him small gifts, in return a bunch of wild berries, a curiously shaped river stone. It was her own quiet way of saying, "I see you. I am trying." A fragile hope had begun to bloom in the desolate landscape of her heart. But the ghosts of her past were not so easily banished. They arrived on a Tuesday, in a cloud of dust and arrogance. Two men on horseback, her late husband's older brother, Marcus, and a cousin. Marcus was a man cut from the same cruel cloth as her husband, a bully who saw her as his family's property. He had tracked her down, furious that she had escaped, and had come to drag her home. Nora was outside, tending to her small garden, when they rode up. The sight of them sent a bolt of pure, ice-cold terror through her. Her body remembered the fear before her mind did. She froze, her hands clutching the small trowel, her breath catching in her throat. Well, look what we have here. Playing farmer in the dirt. Your little holiday is over, Eleonora. You've embarrassed the family long enough. You're coming back with us." All the progress she had made, all the fragile courage she had built, seemed to crumble in an instant. The old fear, the instinct to obey, to make herself small and disappear, washed over her. Marcus dismounted and took a step towards her, his hand outstretched to grab her arm, his face twisted in a cruel smirk. But he never reached her. A figure on horseback appeared as if from nowhere, moving with a silent, swift speed that was startling. It was Caleb. He had been watching from the ridge of his own property, as he did every morning, a silent guardian she didn't even know she had. He didn't draw his gun. He didn't need to. He simply reined his horse to a stop directly between Nora and her tormentors, his presence a sudden, immovable wall of quiet power. Marcus, startled, looked up at the tall, imposing rancher. "This is a family matter, Ryder. Stay out of it. She is coming with us." Caleb didn't even look at him. His gaze was fixed on Nora, his expression calm and steady. He was not there to fight her battle for her. He was there to give her the strength to fight it herself. This was her all-in moment. She could shrink back into the shadows of her past, or she could step into the light of her new future. She looked at Marcus's hateful face and saw a lifetime of fear. Then she looked at Caleb's quiet, unwavering eyes and saw a lifetime of patience and respect. And in that moment she made her choice. The trembling stopped. A fire she thought long extinguished ignited in her soul. She dropped the trowel, stood up to her full height, and walked to stand beside Caleb's horse, placing her hand on his saddle. "I am not going with you. You have no claim on me. My husband is dead. I am a free woman. This is my home now." She then looked up at Caleb, a silent message passing between them, and for the first time, she answered the question he had asked a week before. "And he is my choice." The declaration, so simple, so powerful, hung in the air. She had not only defied her past, she had publicly claimed her future. Marcus, faced with a woman who would no longer cower and a man who was clearly prepared to defend her to the death, was left powerless. With a final, venomous curse, he and his cousin turned their horses and rode away, defeated not by violence, but by a woman's courage. Nora stood, her hand still on Caleb's saddle, breathing the free air of her new life. As the dust from the departing horses settled, a profound silence enveloped the small homestead. Nora stood, her hand still resting on Caleb's saddle, her body trembling with the aftermath of a battle hard won. The fear was gone, replaced by a sense of liberation so pure and overwhelming it felt like taking her first true breath. She had faced the ghosts of her past and had not broken. Caleb dismounted, his movements slow and deliberate. He stood before her, his eyes filled with a look of such profound admiration and tenderness that it made her heart ache. He had witnessed her transformation, from a frightened, haunted woman into a beacon of quiet strength. He had offered her a shield, but she had forged her own sword. He reached out, not to touch her, but to gently take the empty milk bottle from the porch step. Then, he looked at her, a quiet, heartfelt question in his eyes. He didn't need to speak. She understood. With a small, radiant smile that lit up her entire face, she nodded. It was her answer to the question he had been asking silently for a week. It was her invitation. Together, they walked onto the small, rickety porch. She went inside and returned not with an empty cup, but with two, and a small pot of coffee she had been keeping warm on the stove. They sat together on the porch steps, the newly risen sun warming their faces. It was a simple act, sharing a cup of coffee, but for them, it was a ceremony, a quiet celebration of their victory and the beginning of their new life. The silence between them was no longer one of caution or healing, but of deep, comfortable, and unspoken love. 1 year later, the dilapidated line shack was unrecognizable. It was now a cozy, lovingly repaired home, its windows adorned with curtains, its porch rail lined with pots of blooming flowers. A path, worn smooth by daily use, now connected it to Caleb's main ranch house. It was no longer a place of refuge, but a part of a larger, thriving whole. Nora was no longer the haunted, fragile woman who had sought shelter there. She was radiant, her face filled with a peace and happiness that seemed to emanate from her very soul. She and Caleb were partners in every sense of the word. Their lives intertwined, their love a quiet, steady presence that had healed them both. One morning, on the anniversary of the day they had first truly met, Nora woke to a familiar, comforting smell. She walked out onto the porch to find Caleb waiting for her. He was holding a tray. On it was a bottle of fresh milk and a single, large loaf of bread, still warm from the oven, shaped like a heart. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He told her then, his voice a warm, gentle rumble, that a year ago, he had offered her his heart with a side of hope. Today, and every day for the rest of our lives, I promise to bring you my heart, a home, and a love that will never ask for anything but your own in return. You kept your promise, Caleb. You were gentle with my heart, and now it is entirely yours. And as they stood together on the porch of the home they had built, bathed in the light of a new day, they knew their love story was not a grand, dramatic tale. It was a quiet one, built slowly, patiently, one loaf of bread, one wildflower, one act of unwavering kindness at a time. It was a testament to the simple, powerful truth that sometimes the deepest love doesn't begin with a fiery passion, but with a gentle, persistent promise of a new morning. If this story of patient love and healing touched your heart, click the video on your screen now for another unforgettable tale from the Wild West. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us what part of the story you loved most in the comments below. Your support is the bread and milk for our story.